The truth is that this was one of those conversations that is probably long overdue for many of us. The inspiration really came out as a result of someone here who recommended it, and it was, I thought, a very appropriate conversation to have, simply because since October 7th, I've been feeling very helpless. I feel like there's very little that I can do. Whatever I do as a rabbi, I do, obviously. I engage, I speak, I help, I inspire, I hope, I do my part, but I believe that the core of all conflict is spiritual. And therefore, no matter what I can do politically, no matter what I can do militarily, if there is no one addressing the spiritual root issues that is afflicting the world, then no matter what you do externally, you're always going to be stuck somewhat externally. So internally, internal work is what I believe fixes and repairs external work. So having said that, we've been having this conversation about parents. We spoke about parents being the segue between all relationships between man and God, man and man. It's the fifth of the 10 Commandments. It is the bridge between those two worlds. And at the core, the story of the Bible begins with first Adam and Eve, and then it goes to the story of Cain and Abel. And the story of Cain and Abel is a story about siblings and sibling rivalry, and the interplay between brother and brother, older brother and younger brother, one hurting the other. You see the same thing happening again a couple of chapters later with Noah and his sons, how the sons themselves disrespected the father and not all of them, but Ham did not give proper kavod, did not give proper honor to his father, and Shem and Yafet giving the proper honor and correcting the mistake of Ham. You see it again later with Yaakov and with Yitzchak and Ishmael, right? A duality, a breakaway in what it is to have proper morals and respect and honor. What is your moral code? You see that again playing out with Yaakov and Esav. You see it again playing out with the Shvatim. So at the core, the story of Genesis, the foundation stone of our religion, of our faith, rests on this idea that there's something broken with how we relate to people. How we relate to our parents, and certainly how we relate to our siblings is even part of that. So this is a very dry, boring class. I apologize that you came in the middle of this. We've done other things that are way more exciting. But this is just very do this, matter of fact, do this. It'll hopefully give you the ability to kind of think more deeply, more meaningfully about your relationship with your parents and your siblings. We'll see, we'll do that today as well. And it's all there because at the core, there's certain things that are fixed. There's certain choices I can't make. I can't choose who my parents are going to be. I can't choose my siblings, although sometimes I really felt like I wished I could. But, and certainly my parents, I felt that way sometimes, that's for sure. But you can't choose those people. These are the people that you're stuck with for the rest of your life. And now the question is, well, how are you going to respond to them? How are you going to respond to the people that are in your lives that are stuck, fixed, that can't be changed? And I believe that at the core, when we talk about Jewish law, the law is law. But the laws are there to help you have the ability of being empowered to make the right choices under the right circumstances. So what I did was I went through a series of sections. I want to skip the first one, number one, stepmother and stepfather. But yes, you have to honor them. Okay, and if you have a stepmother or stepfather, you honor them for as long as your parents are alive. Once a parent dies, you no longer have an obligation to go ahead and honor your step-parents. You want to go through the rest of those laws, that's all there in a nutshell. Okay, but I want to kind of double tap on this brother and sisters. Do you have a responsibility to honor your brother and sister, right? And if you do, where does that honor come from? Right? What is it predicated on? Everything that we do in Judaism has to be based on something. There has to be either a biblical source or rabbinic source. So the question is honoring your brother, sister, biblical or rabbinic? It doesn't matter if it's biblical or rabbinic. And the answer is, well, yeah, it does matter because there are all kinds of different ramifications if it's a biblical command or a rabbinic command. So the Gemara says in the Talmud in Ketubot, that's number one, says that there's an additional vav in the word ve'et, kaved et avicha ve'et imecha, right? And therefore that actual vav in ve'et, you need the word vav there. And therefore, the Gemara says, is a proof that honoring your brother and sister, okay, is a tag on to honoring your parents. Now the question is, how far do you have to go? Do you have to stand up when your older brother walks into the room? Do you have to, you know, like let them cut you? Like how much of your honored elder sibling of honor do you actually have to give them? So according to some poskim, that's the rabbinic faction that defines the law, says that an older brother, the oldest of the brothers, we're not talking about any brother. So if you have 5 older brothers, you don't give all of them honor. You give the eldest of the eldest, the first guy, the first one that came out, that one. Now it's interesting, by the way, you might note, like, why is it going to the brother and not to the sister? Right? And the truth is that you'll see at the end that there's actually a fascinating conversation as to whether or not you have to give honor to the sister in the same way you do a brother. An eldest sister or older brother, do they carry the same weight as far as honor? And the answer is, at the end, the answer is yes. However, there's still a safek, according to some, whether yes or no. Question? Correct.
So the vav, it's for both.
It's for what? It's not necessary.
It's also for the boy and also for the girl, the oldest, no?
Correct. No, it is. Yes, it is. Ve'et is definitely there. The word ve'et is often used in other areas. For example, I'm going to get back to it. For example, going to the mikveh, right? You have to ve'et basacha, like, you know, timshach b'mayim. You got to go ahead and you should immerse your body in the water. So the word ve'et comes to include your hair. Right? Why do you need the vav there? Ve'et. Just put your body in the water, therefore it should include your hair. But the fact that the vav is there, but obviously there's external things we call toldaot, chitzoni things, external things. A sibling would be an external thing. And yes, brother and sister would fall into that category in the same way that hair, even though it's not technically part of the body, but it is. And therefore if there's a safek, if there's a doubt as to whether or not the external things, the hair, is actually part of who you are, the answer is yeah, it's covering all of that. So letters and words make a difference. By the way, it's so apropos because if you're following the AI space right now, the artificial intelligence space, you know that what makes, I guess, artificial intelligence is large language models. Large language models are a system of lots of words, lots of language, and based on context, based on, you know, the algorithms they use on language, every letter matters. Right? Whatever you're going to pump into the question, or you're going to make the query for ChatGPT, WhatsApp, whatever version of Grok, whichever version of AI you're using, how you ask the question will impact the kind of answer you get. Right? So the words and letters matter, and similarly in the Torah itself, how the pasuk is written, how the verse is stated, why is there an extra letter, an extra word, an extra vowel, all impacts how you and I are allowed to go ahead and understand and apply the actual law. Okay, apologies, my grandpa glasses. Okay, so there he says apologies. So according to some poskim, definition of older brother is the eldest brother. Even if one is number 2, even if the brother is considered older than himself, he needs not honor them except for the oldest one. Other poskim, however, interpret older to mean any brother who is older, regardless of whether or not he is the eldest or not. One should follow the most stringent view and honor all the brothers. That's what I think makes the most sense. If you have a set of siblings, you're one of 4, one of 5, one of 10, whatever your number is, you should really be giving all of them honor based on the fact that you have to give honor to your parents. In the same way, by the way, you'll see later that we have a mitzvah of giving honor to your grandparents, right? Now the question is, do you have to give honor to your great-grandparents? So why do you have to honor your parents? Your grandparents, I mean. Parents, I have a pasuk, right? Why do I have to honor my grandparents? Since I have an obligation to honor my parents, and my parents have an obligation to honor their parents, my obligation to my parents and their obligation obligates me. Now, what about great-grandparents? Do you have an obligation to honor your great-grandparents? Because it's not your parents' responsibility to honor them anymore. It's it's via the grandparent, right? So there's a pasuk that says, how does it go again? B'nei banim ki banim, right? We say that the children of children are like my children. So that would include the grandparents and not the great-grandparents. And therefore, some poskim would say that b'nei banim ki banim means that your responsibility is only to your grandparents, not your great-grandparents. So, for example, would you, if your grandparent had a financial situation where they are like destitute, do you have a halachic obligation to support your grandparents? Your parents, you do. If your parents became broke, they file Chapter 11, and they can't support themselves, it would be your responsibility to support your parents first. As a matter of fact, before you give any other charity dollar, every charity dollar you're giving should go to your parents first, right? It goes, We say, "Aniye irecha kodem," that the poor people of your community come first, and therefore you look inward and you go outward. So who's it first? Everyone in my family, my immediate family first. If I have a sibling that's struggling financially, my charity dollar should go to my sibling. My parents, my siblings, my uncles, my aunts, and then you keep going outward and outward into your community, your state, your city, your state, countries, and so on and so forth. Okay? So what about your great-grandparents? Do you have an obligation to go ahead and support your great-grandparents? Your grandparents you do because the obligation of your parents go on to the grandparents. But what about the great-grandparents? It's machloket actually. It's unclear. Obviously, the right thing to do is if you have a great-grandparent, they've got to be really old, or unless your parents got married really young, which is possible depending which community you're from. But the obligation, I would always say the obligation is always there. The question is, what's the motivation? How many of you need a verse in the Bible to tell you to honor your parents? Don't raise your hand, right? It's like obvious, no, right? It's like, isn't it obvious that you should go ahead and honor your parents? And the truth is, it depends on who you ask. What happens to an absentee parent? Would it be obvious to that child that they have to honor their parents? What happens to parents that are separated and they had a horrible marriage and they just completely neglected the kids? Or one parent was abusive to the child, right? How far of honoring parent, like how far does it go? Are there any limitations to honoring the parents? So while it may seem intuitive, which I think parts of it are, it doesn't answer all of the specifications and the questions that we all deal with in life. So what happens when a parent becomes abusive, right? Well, what is abuse? How do we define abuse? How do we understand how to apply the law? What does it mean? It says, kibbud av v'em, I have to honor them. We spoke about honor and reverence. What does honor mean, and what are the limitations of honoring, and what are the limitations of reverence? Do I always have to listen to everything my parents say, or there are circumstances where I don't have to listen to what they say? All those things are part of this conversation. So we're having the conversation simply because I want to try to upgrade the way you think about it. If you're not thinking about it, then you're just letting your relationship with your parents happen. Now, it's important to remember that the relationship between parent and child is always controlled by the child and not the parent. And therefore, the relationship you have with your parents are very much an expression, that relationship is an expression of your choice, not your parents' choice. Which is like a weird thing to say. Because you'd expect that the parent who's older, more mature, more sophisticated, right? That responsibility would fall on them, but that's not true, it's a mistake, right? How do I prove it? What's my proof? That the child is in control of the relationship? You guys, I say this all the time. The person that loves the least is always in control of the most. The one that can walk away the fastest from the relationship is, you don't think so? Oh, it's disappointing? Because it puts the responsibility on you. You can feel that way. Yeah, well, think about it. The way in which we define love is the desire to give unconditionally, altruistically. And therefore, the more someone gives to something, the more altruism there is in that relationship, the more that love that relationship experiences. The more I can create a space for my children to give to me, the more I teach them to love me. The more I do for my children, the more I love them, and the less they learn to love me. Yeah.
I can see how ultimately the person who controls the ability to turn off the switch on the relationship is the child. But are you saying that the child A to Z controls the status of the relationship?
Yeah. Listen, a parent can still say, no, I don't want to have a relationship with you.
But are you talking about having a relationship or the quality?
I'm talking about both actually. Having the relationship and the quality of the relationship is all in the child. Obviously, it takes two to tango in a relationship. We're talking about a parent that wants to be there. But the quality of that relationship is dependent on the child. Yeah.
So what if you have very strict, let's say if the child's a teenager and the parents are really strict, and they're the ones that are very controlling, and the teenager is like the very authoritarian type of relationship. How's the child controlling?
Just because you have to make a distinction between the rules that parents set up in a home and the quality of the relationship that they have with one another. A parent can have a situation where there's an overreach of power. We spoke about that, right? Too much, too restrictive, too whatever it is. That's true. But it doesn't matter because the child still has a choice to how he or she wants to respond to that reality. My parents are fixed. I can't change them. The only thing I can change is how I respond to them. The only thing you can do is choose how you want to respond to your parents, how you're going to respond to your siblings, how you're going to respond to that annoying person sitting next to you at work, how you're going to respond to whoever it is. That's the only thing you can control. I can't control anything else. There are certain things that are fixed. The only thing that you and I have control over, okay, is our response. And therefore, I would say spiritually, the work that all of us need to be spending time in developing for ourselves is, well, am I really thinking about my response? Am I thinking about the nature of that relationship? Am I really being mindful of what that relationship could look like? Or I'm just, just letting whatever the relationship carry itself on and it's going nowhere. Yeah.
Is the onus on the child the same when they're 5, 25, and 50?
No, of course not. I mean, obviously it's not a 5-year-old doesn't have that onus. And I'd say a 12-year-old and a teenager for sure does have that onus. I'd say that the onus begins in your 20s, depending on your maturity level, yeah.
How come you only have the obligation to honor your older siblings, but not all your siblings?
It's a great question. The question is, again, how far-reaching is this ve'et, right? How far-reaching is this idea that we're going to include a sibling altogether? There's no explicit verse in the Torah that says, I'm sorry about that, so explicit, your head keeps going in the right. Yeah, there's no explicit verse in the Torah that says that you have a responsibility to honor your siblings, right? So we're learning out from this particular verse, we're going to include the brother also. Now the question is, how far do we go? Is it all the brothers or is it the eldest brother? So it's a debate amongst different rabbis. Some rabbis will say, no, it's just the oldest brother. You can't go ahead and stretch it out to all of them. Logically, it should be all of them. But in terms of law, legalese, it's only the eldest. Yeah.
Does that apply also to older stepsisters?
It would apply to older stepsisters as well. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Any other questions?
If there's no older brother and older sister,
Yes.
who's in charge?
She's in charge. She's always in charge. Yeah. Yeah. I'm one of 3 and I'm a middle child. And I had an older sister. My family were Sephardic, so obviously, like, my sister didn't count. And sorry, that's just the way, it wasn't me, it was them. And so, like, I was kind of like raised as the eldest child and certainly given status as the eldest child. I never wanted it. And, but I deeply love and respect my sister. And I give her as much honor as I possibly can. And if not the same kind of honor, like, if I'll give you an example, ready? If your sister walks into the room, okay, your older sibling walks into the room, do you stand up for them? And the answer is you do. You're supposed to stand up for your sister. You're supposed to stand up for your siblings, right? Certainly your eldest. Everyone will agree the eldest, right? All of them, you can go ahead and you could say, how much, how far, whatever it is. But you have a sibling coming in, you have a responsibility. Your eldest sibling asks you for water. And your second sibling asks for water. Who do you get it first? The eldest goes first, right? There are rules of engagement. And the whole purpose of the rules of those engagements are there for one reason alone, to teach you to have honor for your parents. That's all it is. It's about creating the hierarchy of being able to, like, again, be mindful of the relationship that is, like, super important. That is the relationship with my parents. If I am spending all this time on building this relationship with my parents and I'm being mindful of it, I'm sure 2 things will happen. One is I'll start being more mindful about the relationship that I have with other people, right? And I'll have the ability of being more mindful of my relationship with God. Right, so that is like the keystone habit of relationship building. It is that perfect muscle in the middle that goes both ways, up and down. It goes up to God and down to humanity and within yourself. So that is the relationship. So we're constantly thinking about how we go ahead and fix these relationships. So siblings, even though I've never really considered siblings as something I need to take seriously, because they're just like your siblings, right? But in reality, the way in which you actually consider your siblings and the honor of your siblings impacts your ability to take relationships more seriously. Part of what I do is on my free time, I meet with couples, right? So a lot of people are getting married in the summer, so I do a lot of Chatan and Kala classes over the summer. And I'm probably one of the few Chatan teachers that will meet with both the Chatan and Kala, I'll give them classes together, right? So I actually got a phone call once from the Mikvah lady, And she's like, I have a Kala here. Is it that you were her Kala teacher? I'm like, yeah, that's me. Anyway, it was I got in trouble for that, but I'm allowed to teach Kalot and Chatanim. It's all the same stuff. Obviously, it's better for a girl to have a Kala teacher that's a female and not a male. But if I have a girl who's living with her boyfriend and she's not going to go to a Kala teacher because she doesn't want to go to me either, then I'm going to teach her whatever I can teach her and get her to go to the mikvah. Anyway, so having said that, so part of the prep work of a bride and groom is preparing them for this special day, right? You're getting married. Now, what makes your wedding day special? So for most people, you're not really thinking about it. How could it not be special? Like I waited my whole life for this day. Better be special, right? And you just feel like you're just going to show up and it's going to be great. And so often what people do is they revert to, well, it's going to be a great day. And the way you make a great day greater is by party hard. And therefore, the way in which you think about your wedding is it's just going to party and have a great wedding, right? And this is a mistake. I'm not saying you shouldn't party on your wedding day. You definitely should party hard. But the whole purpose of the wedding day is for two people to make a commitment of marriage. As a matter of fact, the reason why people travel around the world, the reason why people are buying special dresses and gowns and whatever, and all these things that you do for a bride and groom is because we're investing in the commitment of that relationship. And therefore we will travel for that, we'll get dressed up for that, we'll go to these ridiculous places and drive really far and sit in traffic for weddings because we're trying to do our part to invest in that relationship. But once that relationship is actually aligned and there's a commitment there, okay, then the partying begins. There's no premature partying, because if there's premature partying, what ends up happening is the bride and groom don't really get a chance to really focus on what the whole purpose of the wedding day is. Okay, ready? What is the holiest day of the year? Yom Kippur. It's really Shabbat. But anyway, Yom Kippur, it's your question. But it is actually. The answer is the holiest day of the year is really Shabbat. Okay? The second holiest day of the year is Yom Kippur. During Yom Kippur, what is the holiest moment of the day itself? Okay, what's happening there? The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is going into the Holy of Holies and getting atonement for the Jewish people. That would be the pinnacle, the zenith, the paramount, the highest point of Kedusha during the year. Okay? Now, take all that holiness, okay? A chatan and kala on their wedding day are holier than the Kohen Gadol coming out of the Kodesh Kodashim in Yom Kippur. Do you understand that? That's powerful. But how are people treating that day? Sephardim don't fast on their wedding day. They don't have to fast. I did. I took a Tanit Dibur on my wedding day. I finished all of Tehillim on my wedding day. I didn't have to do those things. I wanted to make my wedding day special. So how is I going to make it special? How is I going to make that moment important for me? Because if I didn't make it important for me, it would just be like any other day. Because all I had to do that day was literally just wash my hair, throw on a suit, and I was ready. That was it. You can't sleep the night before anyway. So you're up early. So, what are you doing all day? There's nothing to do. It's all set. You're worrying about flop. Don't worry about it. Flowers, liquor, orchestra, photos. You don't have to worry about that stuff, right? You just got to do you. You appoint someone else to worry about the flop, and you do you. And the way you do you is by making that moment in time unique for yourselves. Okay, this is true for all things in life. All things in life can become meaningful. The only way they can become meaningful is you make it meaningful. Shabbat can be so profound, it can be so meaningful, but it's not going to be meaningful if you're not making it meaningful, right? Relationship with people can become meaningful if you want to invest in it. Now, it's easy to make an investment in a relationship if you like the other person, if there's attraction there. It's easier, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be investing in other relationships. Some relationships, you can't, the attraction thing doesn't matter. Best friends, right? Best friend's a best friend no matter what, right? And therefore, you have to invest in that relationship. We often, in all of our relationships, especially our old ones, you know what we do? We lean on the most easiest parts of our character, and the weight of the history of the relationship carries the relationship through. But that's not healthy. Most relationships end with fighting and stupidity because those friends haven't spent time investing in building the relationship. They're allowing the weight of their time together as children, their history together, carry the relationship. We do this with our parents. How many of you are proactively working on investing on the relationship with the parents? You're not. You're kind of coasting and using the history of your parents to get by in that relationship. But if you want that relationship, just like God willing, Bezrat Hashem, soon, your wedding days, to be meaningful, the only way that's going to happen is if you invest in it for yourselves. Meaning could only come with effort. Right? Just the way it is. If there's no effort, there's no meaning. So it's very simple. If you just did a very quick assessment of your relationships, okay, the ones that you have to work the hardest in are the ones that are the most meaningful. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the best. It doesn't mean that they're the most important. Just for whatever reason, the circumstances force you to have more meaning in those relationships. This is why often when you have two people working together in teams at work, there's a lot of crossing of boundaries because of the effort you're putting to make that relationship work for the work that you're doing. And therefore you get this fictitious or false perception of the nature of your relationship. It's artificial, but it's becoming not superficial, it's becoming actually more official through the work that you're doing, unintentionally. Is that clear? Okay. Having said that, the consequences is as follows. Okay, number 4. Even if parent tells a younger sibling that he need not honor his older sibling, he may not listen to that. For example, if a parent tells a child, you know, to bring your older sister a drink, the child must nonetheless bring the sister the drink. If this permission was granted in response to the fact that the older brother was acted abusively toward the parents, the younger child should consult a competent halachic authority, which means even if that brother, okay, externally has broken his own relationship with the parents, it's still a she'elah as to whether or not that child doesn't have to go ahead and honor the parent. Sorry, and honor the sibling. Okay? That's how important it is. One must honor his older brother and his sister not only when his parents are alive, but even when they pass away. That's interesting also. There are 2 schools of thought regarding the posthumous honor for the older sibling. One should consult the competent halachic authority. Okay, fine. Younger brother, who is an accomplished Torah scholar. This is actually very important. I often quote this to my sister. The younger brother who is an accomplished Torah scholar must honor his older brother, even if the older brother is less of a scholar than the younger brother. Doesn't change. If the older brother is halachically deemed a rasha, that's probably me, there is no obligation to honor him. Thus, if an older brother has helped or has what? Heaped verbal abuse, that's right, thank you, on his younger brother, who is a Torah scholar, the younger brother may excommunicate the older brother and no longer need to honor him. So depending on the nature of the relationship, they can break down, yeah.
Does that apply to an older sister as well?
Yes, it would apply to an older sister as well. In the case of multiple births, right, I actually met a twin that has, they're identical twins, but they have 2 different birthdays. Right? And they were born in 2 different years. Right? So they were born, like the first baby was born on December 31st at at 11:58. And the other sibling was born on January 1st at 12:09. So you could have 2 twins that have 2 different birthdays and born in 2 different years. Anyway, fine. So I thought that was cool. I didn't realize that could actually happen, but it's a thing. Where were we?
Wait, quick question.
Yeah, question.
Is that what's required for a twin to be older in Judaism, or
It's who comes first.
Okay. So
Yeah, no, date doesn't matter. It's just this timing. Whoever comes out first. Even though, by the way, it's interesting. There's a interesting discussion in Midrash as to whether or not Esav was older than Yaakov. But even though he came out first, the Midrash says that Yaakov was conceived first, so technically he was the eldest. Now, I don't know how that works exactly in the outside world, but it's whoever is born first is first. I don't know if you know how to measure conception at that stage. Okay, fine. Where do we go? Number 9. In the case of multiple births, okay, we did that already. Okay, what do we merge must? Honor the one who merged earlier. So therefore, if you have twin siblings, the one that was born 2 minutes earlier, that gets the status of being the older sibling. According to Minchas Chinuch, one must honor the older siblings just as one would honor parents. Chidah. And others disagree. It requires a lesser degree of honor for the siblings. For example, one may rise full height in honor of the siblings. Simply rising a little bit is a sign of respect is sufficient. Likewise, one should speak to the older sibling in an honorable and humble fashion and honor them with food and drink. Yeah, right. Okay, fine. One should consult with the common halachic authority regarding the parameters of this obligation. According to all opinions, one may call an older sibling by his name. Likewise, one may sit in his seat. So it's not like the full weight of of honoring the parent. There are limitations. One is not obligated to show reverence to an older sibling. It's only honor. Now, why is that? Anyone know why? Remember, there's two parts. There's yira and kavod. Okay, reverence and honor. It says kaved et avicha v'etimecha, and that's talking about honoring. There's no et in reverence. When the pasuk speaks about yira, when it speaks about reverence, there's no additional vav there in the et, and therefore that application of the law does not follow for reverence. It's only honoring, and that's why you could sit in their seat, and that's why there are limitations to how far the honoring part goes. Any other questions?
Do I have to remind my younger siblings, like, respect?
Out of honor for your parents. I mean, yeah, you should.
No, not really. Like, let's say you disrespect your parents and your mom's like,
No.
hey, like, watch your mouth. Like,
Oh, for sure. No.
do I have to do as an older sister, say the same thing to my younger sister?
Yes, you should. What's that? You have, yeah, definitely. Every single older sibling has a responsibility. Every older sibling has a responsibility to give his younger sibling or her younger siblings the musar, the tochacha, the rebuke that they need to honor their parents. So if they're doing things that are out of line, certainly if a parent, for whatever reason, doesn't have that kind of weight, they just don't want to deal with it, they're tired, they're older, and you have a younger sibling or the older sibling who's taking on that responsibility, they have a biblical obligation to go ahead and to be michanech, to educate the younger siblings, 100%. And if they're not aware of the fact that they have to honor you, just print out these sheets and show it to them. This is all based on Shulchan Aruch. You can watch the end of this video. I'm happy for them to go ahead and call me if they have any questions, any concerns, but I'm happy to go through it. Okay, there you go. Okay, grandparents, we spoke about this very briefly. You can go ahead and deal with that later. In-laws. Obviously, in-laws is a whole thing we spoke about as well. I want to skip that. I want to get to aunts, uncles, and others, number 5. All right, according to some authorities, one is enjoined to honor his parents, brothers, and sisters, that is, his uncle and aunts. While after the death of one's parent, the obligation to honor aunts and uncles is only rabbinic, which means that we have an obligation to honor our uncles and aunts. How far does this go, right? Even my uncles and aunts, we have a chiyuv mid'oraita when our parents are alive to honor them. After they die, it's only mid'rabanan.
Why though? Because
Why what?
why after a parent passed away you don't have
Because remember that the obligation that we have to them comes by force of the parent. And therefore, because my parent is obligated to give kavod to the other siblings, okay, depending on where they are, but even because they have their parents, we have an obligation to give our uncles and aunts via our parents. So the parent is no longer there. The question is, how far reaching is that obligation of honoring the other family members go?
And how about the father passed away, right? So do I have a strong obligation? Of course I honor my grandmother, but
Of course.
do I have that obligation the same as my uncles and aunts have the
No,
obligation to
no,
honor?
no, no, it's not the same. It's less, but you still have it because a grandparent is considered a parent. Right? That's the unique. Now, if it was a great grandparent, that would be different. Right? But a grandparent, certainly you would have the same exact obligation. Good question. Okay. Now, he says as follows. One is obligated, okay, fine. One is obligated to rise for the aunt and uncles when they approach within 4 amot. Likewise, one must honor them verbally, speaking to them respectfully manner. It is proper to address them directly, right? Even referring to them as speaking to the others. So you're talking like Uncle Chaim or Aunt Rachel, rather than simply by name. You can't say, hey, Josh, and it's your Uncle Josh or Auntie, whatever it is, Melissa, you have to call them Auntie, Uncle, give them that title. You can't just go ahead and call them by name. Okay? Even a nephew or nieces who's older than the uncle and aunt must honor them. Including mitzvah kibbud avim is the obligation to honor those people whom one's parents honor. One who acts disrespectfully towards these people embarrass the parents, and therefore you are sinning. Priorities. The honor of the parents takes precedence over the honor of any other relative, even grandparents, certainly over step-parents, brother and sister, uncles and aunts, and in-laws. If there's a conflict between the wishes of one's grandparents and his in-laws, he should follow the directive of his grandparent. This is also true regarding step-parents during the life of one's parent, or one's older brother. The request of all these relatives takes precedence over that of in-laws. Of course, one should try to do so in a fashion that avoids direct confrontation with one's in-laws. If by doing so one will place even a severe strain on domestic harmony, halakhic counsel should be sought. According to some poskim, honoring great-grandparents takes precedence over honoring grandparents. It's a machloket. Yes?
What's 4 amot?
What is?
4 amot.
What is 4 amot? About 8 feet. Okay, so you have about like 8 feet, so that means like, it's very simple. Like when there's actually, you know that when you see your rabbi, you're supposed to stand up, right? So now there's 2 kinds of rabbis. There's the rabbi that teaches you like your primary rabbi, Rabbi Prime, okay? And that's the guy you call for all your questions. When you see that rabbi, even if it's 100 feet away, when you see them, make eye contact, you're supposed to stand up right away and not sit until they pass by or whatever it is, right? If they're gonna pass by you, let's say you're sitting over there and your rabbi walks in, you have to stand up and you're always going down there. Until he passes by, you gotta keep standing. Now, however, let's say it's just a rabbi you have who's your teacher teaching you like a class, but not your primary rabbi. For that rabbi, you would stand up only when he's within 8 feet of your vicinity. And now the same is true with our parents. When your parents walk into the room, you see them, you should stand up the second you see them. But the sub-honor of all people that like uncles, aunts, grandparents, whatever it is, that's only within the 8 amot rule, the 4 amot rule. Yeah.
With a rabbi who's not your primary rabbi, you stand up and then you can immediately sit back down? Or
Yes, you can stand up and sit down back down.
And with your parent, do you have to wait till they sit, or you can also immediately sit back down?
You should wait until they sit.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless you get permission from your parents not to stand up when they enter the room.
Okay.
And by the way, the question is, let's say your parents give you that permission, which everyone should definitely ask permission from their parents not to stand up when they walk into the room. But the question is, should you do it regardless? And so I would say definitely get permission not to stand up, but when you can, you should. But this way, if you're lazy or whatever it is, you're just in the middle of watching something and running it up, you're protected. But obviously, if there are circumstances where you're not being lazy and you can get up, you should be able to get up and show them that reverence. Yeah.
If we take that route and then we like stand up 3 times in a row, does the halakha apply or not for this?
Yeah, it's annoying. 3 times in a row.
So if we get our parents to absolve us, so we don't have to.
You don't have to, but
But
again.
then we do it 3 times in a row, just that like trying, then we're
You could say, listen, I'm studying for a test right now, and you're going to walk in and you have a room that you're sitting in the kitchen, and like the kitchen is like the bridge between all the central nervous system of the home, right? It's the Penn Station of your house, and therefore everyone's walking through every single second, someone's coming in and out. Mother, father, mother, father, mother, father, you can't get anything done. So there you could definitely rely on the fact that your parents told you don't have an obligation to get up and sit. But I'm saying when you're not busy studying for your test, right, or whatever it is that you're doing, you should, even if you got that permission, you should still find a way to show them that kind of reverence.
No, I get that, but if we do that route, right, so we got permission not to do it, but
Yeah.
we're still trying to do it when we can. If you do it when you can 3 times in a row, then are you newly obligated? Because like,
No.
Okay.
Once you get permission from your parents, you get permission from your parents, yeah.
Do you have to stand up and wait till your grandparent sits down?
No.
You don't have to stand for them at all?
You have to stand for them, but you have to wait for them to sit down.
Okay, so it's like this level of the sub-rabbi?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for number 2, when you said you have to properly address like uncle and aunt,
Yes.
your 2 grandparents also.
Yeah. You should do that to your grandparents also. You can't just call them like Steve. You know, hey Steve, what's up? You call them Saba, Safta, whatever the Judo, whatever it is that you're calling your parents. You know, you're gonna call them by that special name that you've given them. Yeah.
What if you're like either estranged or just literally haven't met before, like any of these close relationships
So I didn't meet my mom's parents. I only met when I was 18 years old, and it was really hard. They spoke a language I did not speak, and culturally they're very different, and certainly so. But I still have to show them all the.
Like if you've been told about them by that title, like your grandfather, your grandmother, that I get. But if it's like an aunt or uncle you've never met, you have no relationship with, like how are you supposed to call them, like almost?
Yeah, I had the same thing. My mom has a brother and several sisters I only met that same year. And I have no memory, no uncle memory, no nothing, no aunt memory, and it's weird. It's really hard.
Did you know about this then, or you just did it for
I mean, I knew that she had siblings, but it didn't mean anything to me.
I mean, like, did you know about all these
No, I
people?
did not know this stuff, no.
And you called them by titles just
I call them out of respect. Because there's, again, like the respecting is a very much a cultural thing. There was a time where, you know, people wanted to get rid of all titles and any kind of, now it's like a big thing, you know, pronouns and whatever it is, but like, there was people were trying to get away from that stuff. All kinds of, you know, but today it's meaningful, it's important. It's important for us to have the ability of addressing different people with different kinds of kavod. Like a police officer, you should call him officer, not like, you know, Benjamin, you know, whatever his name is. Right? You don't call him, that's disrespectful. It's out of kavod. You give kavod to people by not addressing them fully by their name and giving them their title and then their name, officer, whatever it is, Brandon, Jacobs, whatever it is. You say that, you know, a doctor, whoever it is, that's out of kavod for their station, we can show them that kavod. Same with the parent, same with the uncle, same with the aunt, same with the grandparent. Yeah.
So, I have a cousin, his husband wanted a close relationship with his kids.
Yeah.
So he had his son specifically call him by his first name. Until this day, this kid is like 11, calls his father by
He's
his
not
first
allowed
name.
to.
But like, how serious? Like, to the point that I should say something? Like, be like, oh,
I mean,
by the way.
you shouldn't say anything to anybody that can't hear what you have to say.
But like,
So if you think that you could share something that is meaningful that they could hear, then it's worth saying it.
but
If they
it's
can't, don't waste your
spiritually
time.
detrimental to
It's
this
what?
whole- Like, it's spiritually detrimental.
I don't know if it depends again. It's hard to say yes or no. I would say that it probably isn't, it's not the best way of raising a kid. Kids need boundaries. When you raise your children and you give them everything, you're destroying them. You turn your kids into narcissists. You make them mentally ill. Mental illness often is an extension of parents who don't create boundaries for their children. If a kid is always going to have a temper tantrum and win, you've just created like a mini sociopath. Boundaries, as much as we hate it, if you think about your parents when they put their foot down and they went nuts on you, that's what made you into who you are. The boundaries are not a bad thing, they're actually a good thing. Everyone needs them. Obviously, there's a healthier way of doing it and an unhealthy way of doing it as parents. And you know, hopefully you're resilient enough to be able to like overcome whatever challenge your parents threw at you. But certainly the idea is that we need to create boundaries for ourselves, with our parents. Because I've seen relationships with parents where they're so chummy. You ever see those parents? They're so chummy with their kids, and it's like weird. They're going out together, they're hanging out with their friends together, they're dressing with each other. It's like, oh, it's weird, right? There's supposed to be a boundary. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a good relationship. I'm not saying you shouldn't have fun with your parents. You should, but you should never forget that a parent is a parent, and that there's a level of respect and honor that you need to be showing them. That's all. Yeah.
There's like a common saying in Russian, but like parents say to their kids, "I'm not your friend." Like I grew up hearing that, and then the first time I translated for another Russian speaker, they're like, "That's so mean." I'm like, "No, it's not. You're supposed to know."
Yeah, your parents are not your friends, 100%. They're not your friends. Parents are not your friends. Anyone who is in a position of authority is not your friend. Not the same kind of relationship, and we need to make that distinction for ourselves. Okay, let's do a little bit more, and we'll call it a night. Okay, do I want to keep going? In-laws.
In general.
Wait, I
In
have a
general.
question about in-laws.
Yeah, go
It's
for
pretty
it.
common. Are you allowed to call, it's like a big thing, how to call in-laws?
Yeah.
Are you allowed, if you call, let's say, your mom all the time, are you allowed to call your in-law by that same?
Yeah, because your obligation to your in-laws goes via the weight of your responsibility to your spouse. So because your spouse has the obligation, you have the obligation. So you should definitely call them. Yeah, definitely don't call them by their first name. Hi, Carol.
Oh, you can't do that.
Well, you could call them something else, not mom. You could call them Nana, you know, whatever. I don't know. You could come up with some other word. That,
Call them like Mrs.
No. Yeah, that would probably be the most formal way to do it. If you can't call them mom, then you probably should do that at the very least. But ideally, it should be something more endearing than their Mrs. and their last name. Yeah, you could do it like my wife calls my mother Ima and not mom, because mom's her mother. You know, so you find another word, that's why I said Nana, find another word that's endearing, and this way you could use that word, and it doesn't take away the title of whatever that word is that you call your mother. And that's how she does it. I call my mother mommy, so I call my mother-in-law mom. So, you know, whatever it is, you could find there's all kinds of ways around it. Do whatever you think is most comfortable. Certainly, something that's endearing is better than something that's more formal. Okay. But also key without the M, honor. Okay, so honor and revere, morah. The parents apply equally to men and women. However, the Talmud teaches that the obligation of the married woman is circumcised due to the limitations placed upon her by her obligation toward her husband, by extension her family. Furthermore, many laws apply differently to men and women, even when unmarried. This is a more complicated subject that I don't want to fully get into, but I just want to we'll just do one or two, and then we'll call it a night. A married woman is absolved from kibbud avim. Okay, you get married, no more honoring your parents. Why? Because it becomes necessary due to her preoccupation. This is a good word, with her domestic responsibilities. Nevertheless, if her husband has no legitimate objection, she is fully obligated to do whatever she can to honor and revere her parents. But it means that a married couple has a responsibility to the person closest to them. Think of it in terms of concentric circles, right? So you have that first circle, that's you and your spouse. And therefore, that is your first order of responsibility. Then you go another circle around it, right? That is your parents, okay? Outside of that, you put in your siblings, uncles, aunts, grandparents, and so on and so forth. You keep going out and out and out and out, and those relationships and responsibilities keep building. But your responsibility first is to the spouse. The Vakta B'ishto says that a man has to leave the house of your mother and father and cling to your spouse. Why? For you to become one flesh. That is the goal of marriage. For two people to leave their home, to become independent, so they can build their own family and build their own house. Okay. Now, even if she suspects that her husband would object to her involvement in honoring her parents, she should desist. However, if she's unsure of his feelings at the particular moment and her parents need her help, she should serve them unless her husband clearly objects. Now, how far does this really go? Like, you're gonna, first of all, this is definitely a test that you should be asking on your dates. Like, you know, would you object? How do you feel about, or you know, a married woman, you know, a wife having a relation with her parents? Anyone who says, "Oh, I would never want you to have anything to do with your parents," don't waste your time with them.
Monster.
Yeah, monster, 100%. As a matter of fact, I say more than that. This is just good eitzat tova. When you find that special person you're going to marry, they can criticize their parents as much as they can, and you can never criticize their parents no matter what. Their relationships they can criticize, you can never do that. That's overstepping boundaries. You're not in a position to criticize the parents, their history, you can't do it, they can do it. So if you hear someone, parent, you know, criticizing the parent, you keep silent, you listen, but never ever use the same exact insults that they lobbied against their parents. You can never use them. They're for them and them alone, never yours. You can do it with your parents, but never with somebody else's parent, because it has to do with the weight of their relationship. That's not your relationship. You still have an obligation to go ahead and honor them and respect it, irrespective of the dysfunctional relationship that that child has with their parents. What if they ask about their parents? So obviously you tell the truth, but you don't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be derogatory. You know, you could say like, and I think your parents are fine people, they're not very honorable because they do these things and so on and so forth. But you don't say, oh, well, yeah, your dad and mom smell, and like they always fight, and like whatever it is, you know, you have to go there. Yeah.
What criticize a grandparent?
Yeah, I would say that you can't criticize a grandparent the same way. You know, but there's two things. There's just honoring the elderly. It has its own function. We're talking about it by way of kibbud avim, and therefore your grandparent, you have a special responsibility to go ahead and honor them by your parents. But let's say it's just an older person in the room. You still have an obligation to stand up for them. You see an elderly person, not your family member, an older person, someone who's over the age of 60. You You know, they got gray in their beard, gray in their hair, whatever it is. Today you can't tell anymore, but like, you know, you see that person, your responsibility is to get up for them out of respect for the elderly. So I would just say, forget about grandparent, parent responsibility. Out of the responsibility of respecting the elderly, you still have a responsibility to go ahead and honor them and do your thing. Anyway, I just want to end with the following, okay? Relationships are complicated, and they're meant to be complicated. Now, what's interesting is that I've seen individuals that have spent so much time working on their relationship with other people, they've mastered those relationships. They spend so much time looking outward that they've actually figured out how to get those relationships working. The purpose of this conversation isn't for you just to look outward and think about how do I look at my parents and honor them. It's about how you could also look inward so you can become the person that naturally honors them. So remember, with any relationship that you're working on, there's always a two-way street. It goes out and in. But because the nature of our body is such where we are always observers and we look outward, right? It's actually a fascinating thing I was looking at over Shabbat where, you know, there's an old philosophical debate about how we observe objects. So is the object that you're looking at able to be perceived because the object is just reflecting the light that's in the room? Or the subject that's observing the object? Is it because the subject is observing the object now has the ability to be perceived? So which one is it? Is there something intrinsic about the object that has its own light? Or is it something about the subject whose light is sort of like, emitting its own, his eyes are emitting its own light to observe it. Now, this is the cool part, ready? When you're looking at any object, where is that observation happening? Is it happening in your eye or is it happening in your brain? It's happening in your brain. Isn't that weird? Like you're seeing me, but you're not seeing me with your eye, you're seeing me in your head. So in reality, you're not really seeing the object and its light, you're seeing the subject is illuminating the object. So everything that we perceive in the outside world is really happening in the inside world of ourselves. But we think of that, the externalities of life, everything's happening outside of ourselves, that those are the important things. Because there's that illusion, right? The eye is concaved. So like when you're looking at a spoon, you hold up a spoon like this, right? Turn it up, turn around, what happens? Everything is upside down, right? Because the concave is bending the light. Our eyes are concaved in the same way that a spoon is. Your eyes see everything upside down in this room, but your brain flips everything right side up. The way in which we observe reality is a complete mind-melting experience. And therefore, from a Torah perspective, we recognize that there's an outside world that we observe, but we are mindful of the fact that everything that we see on the outside is truly happening on the inside. So may you all be blessed with the clarity to recognize that all the relations that you're struggling with and working on is really the attempt to build the most beautiful parts of who you are on the inside. Have a great week, Bezrat Hashem. We'll pick up next week. Thank you so much for coming tonight.